Hey, yeah, what's up, everybody? Are you ready for version 3.5? It looks like the story is about to get really interesting. So let's go ahead and review what happened in the last act before we go ahead and dive into this new region, because Wuthering Waves has dropped a lot of quests in a short span of time. However, this video will only be reviewing and covering Act 5. Despite version 3.5 being next, it harbors the first installment of Chapter 4. So this is kind of unprecedented. By the way, if you like these types of videos, I strongly encourage you to like and share, because this quest was almost 4 hours long. With the wiki still outdated, there's a lot of watching to review. So update, they just added the dialogue today, which takes like 25 minutes to read. Could have used this before I had to rewatch a nearly 4-hour playthrough. Nonetheless, your support would be greatly appreciated. Without further ado, let's get it. This act begins with us, the rover, and we get some text messages from Luke. He says that there's been some development on the Exostrider plan, but he reminds us that the walls have ears, so we should go back to his workshop to be able to talk privately. He also tells us that we now have clearance to access more of the hidden features of the Expedition motorbike. But when it comes to clearance of the Exostrider, that's another story. When we get to Luke's workshop, just like we saw in this segue, we're reminded that he talked to Lucilla about it. And Lucilla herself, she doesn't really have a problem, but it turns out we'll need to win over some other folks in order to get things going. We'll need to win over the heads of the collective. Their biggest backer is the New Federation, and they all answer to a board of investors. Luke tells us that there are some things working in our favor though. Our involvement with clearing up the dark side case, our test scores from Rebel College, us helping out with the reactor drive, Mornier and Lucilla both are vouching for us, and an evaluation personally written by Dr. Luke Herson himself. All this has resulted in us being able to secure a meeting. This meeting is with a man named Chase, who's the head of the Space Trek Collective. Luke says that now that the reactor core has been returned, ideally they want to wait until the Exostrider awakens before taking action. Now this means waiting before going to save Aemeath and waiting before confronting the Thermodian. Sidebar, but when they talk about the Exostrider awakening, this kind of brings up the question, what do they expect to happen once the reactor core is returned? Like, how did they know it was supposed to wake up? And prior to having the reactor core taken, did the Exostrider just normally wake up from time to time? If so, what did it do? Its sword would still have to be in the Strider Gate, right? So does it just get up, go get some tea and snacks before going back to bed? Anyway, the void matter and void storms are going crazy. Basically, they're worried that the Thermodian LF1 is going to break the seal and enter into Solaris. And if this happens, all of Solaris 3 will be at risk, not just Lahai. The collective has its contingencies in place in case something like this happens, but they're all essentially last resort scorched earth plans that destroy decades of research. And nobody really wants that to happen. So we feel that at least we can use this reality as leverage during our meeting. We decide we might need some extra help for this. And Luke has had connections with the Black Shores before, plus our affiliation is no secret to him. So we have him set up a call. We tell Shorekeeper that we need her help. She gives us a brief history on the region, but it all connects. She says that Rover established a connection between the Roya and the Academy in the past. And she tells us about the origin of the Synchronists. Essentially, people knew that the Exostrider was losing power, and the Synchronists were meant to repower the Exostrider via resonance. And that's what this whole system and this whole division was all about. However, when it comes to resonance, Tethys doesn't recommend us to resonate with the Exostrider. And this is basically because of our link and our history with it. Shorekeeper says that deep beneath the surface of Lahai is something called the Keystone, and it was left by the Exostrider. It rests atop the seal over the Strider Gate, acting as a lock. Because we're Lord Arbiter, we can use this Keystone to pilot the Exostrider. The plan is to pilot the Exostrider and use the Exoswarm shell of Aemeath to look for the real Aemeath. After leaving Luke's workshop, we get a text. It's Lucilla. The collective head is waiting to meet us at academic affairs. So we slide on over to the academy, and when we get there, Lucilla straight gasses us up. She's saying we're the best hope and the best candidate for piloting the Exostrider. I mean, we are, but she don't know that. And Chase is just sitting in the shadows like, "Save the intro, Lucilla," saying that we've met before. And of course, we assume this must be from a past life because, bro, we don't know him like that. At least not this go around. Anyways, Chase says time is running out. The Thernoidian situation is worsening, and the Exostrider's natural regeneration is taking way too damn long. We tell him that we want to defeat the Thernoidian and rescue Aemeath, who's beyond the Strider Gate. And Chase feels that taking on the Thernoidian is a bit too ambitious right now, and they don't really want to try taking on its total destruction at this moment. Currently, the collective's desire is to just reinforce the Strider Gate, and to do this, they need a synchronous to pilot the Exostrider and to gain the required action data, so they can finish this special device called the Institute's replica drive. And the plan is to install this device into the Exostrider's chest. Think of it as a new human-made version of the reactor drive that it originally had. Basically, it's a new heart. This allows them to repair the Exostrider and to bring it back to full power. In theory, having the Exostrider's power restored should allow it to be able to strengthen the seal on the gate. However, again, the drive replica needs action data, and that's where someone like us comes in. Chase gives us permission to use the Exostrider because, they have no idea when the Thernoidian just might break the seal, and if it does, it really won't matter at that point. He says we'll only get 10 minutes beyond the Strider Gate to be able to find Aemeath. After that, their void matter barriers will start to break down, and if things go south, they have something called Project Dust Veil. So what is Project Dust Veil? Well, if LF1 enters into Solaris, the plan is essentially to abandon Lahai and seal off the whole underground region. Basically, it becomes a sealed tomb, and Black Shores has already agreed to help evacuate all the people should this need arise and should this plan have to be used. We tell Chase to just lead us to the Keystone, and that we won't be using the cockpit to pilot it. And Chase is basically like, same old Rover, always doing the unconventional. Which really brings up the question, just what connection did Rover have with Chase in the past? After this combo, we run a few tests in the training module. Of course, we ace all the tests, so it seems like we're good to go. But after the simulation test, when we leave the pod, guess who's standing right in the doorway? Aemeath. Or rather, Exoswarm Aemeath. She usually is waiting in the lake house. We're told by Professor Sakya, Aemeath's teacher, that she sometimes wanders to the academy and that her caretaker usually escorts her back home. But for some reason, today, she's being very difficult. We tell Sakya about our plan to bring her back, and she hopes our plan works and that we can bring her student home. Finally, she tells us that we'll need to wait a couple days until the Exostrider is ready to pilot. Just as the scene ends, Exo Aemeath utters the word cassette. 2 days later, we get a text from Mornier. She tells us that the Exostrider is ready for activation. The drive replica is also prepped to collect data, so we should go ahead and come through to the Institute. But there's one peculiar thing. Exo Aemeath is there, and she's not responding to anyone right now. Mornier believes that it's because she's waiting for us. At the Institute, Valentina tells Mornier that the temporary passage to the Keystone is completed, and that the Black Shores remain on standby if there's any help needed. After we greet Mornier, Exo Aemeath runs up to us, and in her hands, she has Aemeath's cassette tape from the cassette depository. And we're all here just questioning what the deal is, but for some reason, everyone just rolls with it with minimal friction. So we take the passage they established and end up in a place far below Lahai's surface, the Dimmer Plains. Right in front of us is this massive tree, which is called the Solvane Heartwood. This tree actually holds up all of Lahai from below. And as we look around, we see Lucilla and Hiyuki. Lucilla formally introduces us. She says how 10 years prior, Hiyuki sealed a void matter rift here in the Dimmer Plains, resulting in the Roya and the collective being able to fortify the seal. The plan is for Hiyuki to handle the perimeter security while we're beyond the Strider Gate. Hiyuki gives us her Shiratori, which will shield us from the void matter and guide us back if lost. She says that if we require aid in void space, we may make a wish to her. Now, Rover doesn't exactly understand the significance of this offering, but Lucilla does, and it's serious. Essentially, as Miko of the Flaming Sakura, she's crazy powerful, but with a catch. We find out more about this in her segue. But basically, as a Miko, she grants wishes, And one of the things she's able to do is draw upon the abilities, powers, and skills of alternate future versions of herself. And the future versions could have acquired massively powerful and insane skills. However, every time she draws upon this power, she burns away some of her potential futures. Once she has no more potential futures left, her existence itself will be burned away. So this is the reason why Lucilla is kind of trying to derail the conversation, and she ends up just saying, hey, only do this if it's life or death. So we set out with Aemeath, but before we do, we're told that the closer we get to the keystone and eventually out into void space, we'll eventually lose contact with everyone due to void matter interference. And because, it's not like they have pylons in the belly of LF1 and out in space. So sure enough, just as we take a few steps away, we lose contact. But we arrive in front of Solvane Heartwood, where the entrance to the keystone rests. And just as planned, we harness the keystone's abilities to pilot the Exostrider. We open a rift into void space and we dive straight on through. Once in void space, we start sensing a frequency. It's Aemeath. But when we reach out, we're grasped by these strange shadowy hands and arms. Then we get a flash of the Grand Architect. There's a flash of light. When we come to our senses, we see Aemeath. Only she's become the real Aemeath, and she gives us the cassette tape held in her hands. However, something about it has changed, but we can't really put our finger on it at the moment. Aemeath pushes us back out of the void. We open our eyes and we find out we're back at Star Torch Academy. We thought we'd only been gone for a couple of minutes, but Mornier calls and turns out we've been out for a full entire day, and now everyone is worried like crazy. On top of this, the Exostrider is now lost beyond the Strider Gate. The only thing we're left with after this whole ordeal is the cassette that Aemeath gave us. So we head back to the Institute to see if we can make a heads or tails of what this actually is. At the Institute, people are preparing for the worst. They're getting ready to activate Operation Dusk Veil, and now they're prepping for mass evacuation. But then we come in and ask them to run the tape. The cassette tape reveals something Aemeath encoded for us, and it's the coordinates to the Exostrider. And while not all the details have been fully fleshed out in this portion of the story, one would assume that in void space, she's able to kind of view the future, the past, and the present, and everything around it. And she gave us this tape because she knew that we'd eventually lose the Exostrider there, and this is the way back. Nonetheless, we cracked the code and we plan to head back into void space. We basically tell everyone at the Institute that, hey, if I don't make it back in a reasonable amount of time, it's up to you guys to make the right call, whatever you guys think that call is. The contamination around the keystone is too great, so we won't be able to use the Strider Gate to get inside. We make a decision to open a sealed rift to go back into void space to rescue Aemeath and to get the Exostrider. The irony is this rift will open up is the same one Hiyuki sealed off, which is also the same one the Fraxidus, more specifically the Grand Architect, originally opened. The same one that weakened the Strider Gate enough to spur on the series of events that would eventually lead to Aemeath's death in the training module over 10 years ago. Everything is connected. Anyways, on our way to this rift, we run into Hiyuki's Shiratori. It guides us to her, and she's fighting Denia, but Denia escapes, and we chase after. Denia's grip on reality seems to be slipping. We put two and two together and discover that those strange shadowy hands and arms we saw earlier while in void space were from Denia. Now it's become apparent that the power we see from Denia comes from the Denodian. However, it isn't clear how much control she actually has over this power. Hiyuki guesses that the Fraxidus might be forcing her to master the power, and soon enough, we'll see just how right all of these assumptions are. We get to this key location of the rift where Hiyuki called upon countless future versions of herself to seal the void. And here she tells us she might not be able to close it once it's opened, after which she expresses the insecurities mentioned in their segue quest, Wishes in the Bell, which is essentially that she knows that we're a great hero because the Grand Architect revealed this to her in an attempt at manipulation to get her to join their side for more power to be able to save Ashinohara. Here she asks if we're confident about rushing into danger like this because we believe we cannot fail. And Rover corrects her, saying, no, we failed before, and that if we truly never failed, maybe there'd be no need to start over. maybe we'd still have our memories, and maybe Solaris would be free from the lament. We sum up all our thoughts by saying, we do this because we can, and because someone has to. Because what truly makes us scared isn't coming up short, it's the thought of not giving it our all. It's revealed here that Lucilla told Rover about how Hiyuki fought a Thermodian in Ashinohara for a long time. So it's in this way she can finally understand Rover and his perspective. She didn't fight because she was certain she'd win. It was because deep down inside, she felt she had to. Finally, Hiyuki agrees to open the seal and reveal the rift. When she begins this process, the dark tide is summoned, and the Grand Architect appears with Denia. Hiyuki is basically like, what are you doing here? I've already burned away the future where I'm the Thermodian Resonator. And the Grand Architect is like, that's all good. I don't even care. We still have Denia, and that she was a Fraxidus creation from the very beginning. We just wanted your power to refine her into a superior vessel. The Grand Architect essentially says he got the idea from how Leviathan the Thermodian created Mia. Sidebar, I don't know how they just be creating people like this, you know what I mean? Like, they gotta spill the lore and the restrictions around this, because right now, this power seems to be a little bit more than broken. It's actually insane. The Grand Architect says, if we made one Denia, we could make another and another. Anyways, Denia is spiraling. She calls for help. It's obvious that this connection between her and the Thermodian is unstable. The Grand Architect just bounces and leaves us to fight an LF1 possessed, mentally unstable Denia. Of course, we beat her down, and then Hiyuki neutralizes her while cutting a rift open into void space. Then Hiyuki draws upon a future where she's able to harness the power of void space to provide us with a Shiratori for protection. Before we enter the rift into void space, Hiyuki asks if our aim is atonement, or to confess our regrets for Aemeath for having been influenced by our deeds to become a hero. But Rover says no, just like the recorded message we heard prior to entering into Lahai.
I hope to make you proud. I hope I haven't let you down.
We want to tell her that we've always been proud of her. When we finally enter into the rift, we're given the perspective of Aemeath. She's standing before the Exostrator, and she uses the Exostrator's power to protect the essence of countless lingering frequencies. All of these frequencies are from people who were basically consumed by LF1, most of which who were explorers and pioneers from Solaris 3 who were devoured out in space. Eventually, we find each other and are reunited inside the Exostrator. And there, we pilot it to do battle against a projection of LF1. We tell Aemeath to go get the drive replica, the heart of the Exostrator. We tell Aemeath, don't worry, this time we'll save the world together. And then we put that work on LF1 and its projection. But eventually, the Exostrator's frequency starts to decay, and LF1 starts to power up and get the upper hand. Just as the Exostrator is about to flatline, Aemeath comes in to the rescue by installing the drive replica, increasing the Exostrator's power far beyond what it was before. And now the Exostrator is even able to speak. With this newfound power, we scrap and beat the brakes off of LF1. And then the Exostrator casts its spear, tossing LF1 to the farthest reaches of the universe. And this basically is the best we can do as far as defeating LF1, because as far as we know, there is no way to permanently terminate its existence. The Exostrator tells us that from now on, once the Strator Gate is sealed, it will stand guard outside of Solaris, barring any future attempt of re-entry by LF1. The Exostrator tells Aemeath that her current state is a consequence for which it bears responsibility. While it slumbered, Aemeath safeguarded Lahai in its stead. So the Exostrator feels guilty about this and wants to repay its debt by imbuing Aemeath with a portion of its power. Finally, the Exostrator wishes to burn something onto a cassette for us to return to Lahai. It tells us that while traveling throughout space at high velocity, it encountered a slow-moving probe called the Far Watcher. Its hull was marked with Solaris script, and it was estimated to have launched a very long time ago. This was one of the 9 interstellar space probes that launched before the etheric sea engulfed Solaris. It intercepted the signal that it was continuously transmitting to Solaris, and it wants to give us this recording as a gift to the people of Lahai. The Exostrider prepares to return us back to Lahai, but before it does, it has just one more request for us. It's so moved by the people of Lahai, all they've done, all they've learned, and most importantly, it appreciates the drive replica, aka its new heart that the people of Lahai made for it. It's so moved by all of this that it asks for permission to change its name to Lahai. After being transported back, Aemeath and Rover recount all that has happened, how the explorers from the past burned the cassette with the info needed to navigate void space, how the people of Lahai decoded the cassette and forged the drive replica. That's what let the Exostrider cast the Denia out. This wasn't a story about heroes saving the world. This was a story about the world saving its heroes. And finally, Rover says, "And now we're home," which is an interesting phrasing. I don't know if they'll come back and revisit Rover's past in the near future, but if you remember back in the story earlier, one of Rover's innermost desires was to return back home. So to hear him say, "And now we're home," is quite meaningful. The scene ends with us seeing all of our friends that we met along the way amidst announcements of void matter concentrations decreasing all around Lahai. In the final scene of the act, we're in a classroom and given the perspective of the Grand Architect. The Grand Architect basically says it's discarding Denia off into our hands, and that he's sure she'll come back in handy somewhere down the road. However, the Grand Architect basically says that they're done with Lahai. They're ready to pack up and continue to keep the ball rolling. The Grand Architect is talking to Cristofaro and some other unnamed Fraxidus agents. But one of the interesting things mentioned by Cristofaro is the title Vice Architect. It would seem that Heiress of the New Federation holds this title. Additionally, remember how it seemed Frolova just might have been leaving the Fraxidus altogether at the end of chapter 211? Well, apparently not, or rather not in the eyes of the Grand Architect. The Grand Architect says they'll personally pay her a visit. He says he no longer has need for Hiyuki. And he also basically predicts that she'll fail to save Ashinohara alone, and she'll burn her existence away, just like her sister, Gyokuro. On the same note, Zashikuwarashi apparently has some interesting news for them. Anyways, folks, that was Act 5 of Chapter 3. Man, this video took me quite a while to get through and to complete. I had no idea that this would be the last act of Chapter 3. So it's kind of weird that we're going into chapter 4, but we're still on a 3.x series. So I was wondering if I should make a 3.x video summarizing the story and going back through it and reviewing it, or if I should just kind of wait until all of 3.x is complete and do it that way. I don't know, I'm kind of torn. Anyway, you guys can let me know what your thoughts are about that and the story in the comments down below. That's all I have for you guys today. And until next time, waves.